No more dilly-dallying. Let's roll the dice and see who we get as we create our League World Cup draft. First thing we need to do is pick our formation and 11 league champs. But that alone would be boring. So to add a little spice, everything is gonna be randomized. Let's start with the formation and see what we get. Oh, wasn't expecting that. Fancy. 3-5-2. This is actually my favorite formation. In fact, did you know the Argentine coach Carlos Bilardo is credited with inventing and making the 3-5-2 formation famous? He used it to lead Argentina to victory in the 1986 World Cup. It was designed to provide defensive stability, while allowing space for Diego Maradona to excel like a spreadsheet, just like his Hand of God incident, ironically, acting as a revolutionary system at the time. In this video, we'll aim to do the same. Time to pick our champions. Let's go.
First up we have...
Rightio, let's see what we get.
Zeri, the Spark of Zon. Noxus, the Curator of the Sands. Misfortune, the Bounty Hunter. Shaco, the Demon Jester. Morgana, the Fallen. Hecarim, the Shadow of War. Fiora, the Grand Duelist. Rise, the Rune Mage. Cassiopeia, the Serpent's Embrace. Twitch, the Rat. And Fizz, the Title Trickster.
Rasclot, I think we may have cooked. Now what we need to do is examine each champion on their abilities and style to figure out which position they'll play. Then we'll take a look at how good their chemistry is as a team in order to determine our team's final rating. Zeri is an ADC marksman who channels her electric magic to charge herself and her blicky. Now, essentially, Zeri is like a dog. You ever seen dogs get the zoomies because they're hyper and so run around for a few minutes but then get tired and end up slumped breathless on the floor? That's what Zeri and her abilities are like. When her passive is fully charged, her attacks do more damage. So that means in football, she'll strike the ball with more power, making a goal more likely. She will then be forced to reset and charge back up though, aka jog around lightly to catch her breath in time for the next attack on goal. Her Q ability Burst Fire is a flurry of shots. This is useful when shooting against the goalkeeper. Zeri's W Ultra Shock Laser is an electric pulse shot from her strap that slows and damages the first person hit. If the pulse hits a wall, it expands into a long-range laser. This is perfect for free kicks because she can literally shoot the ball over walls. She also has a dash in her E ability too, called Spark Surge, which allows her to jump over obstacles and people. This is perfect for dribbling past opposing players. Lastly, her ultimate ability basically gives her the zoomies, but on crack. Therefore, she gets a power and speed boost, perfect for when pressing the attack. Overall, I say she'd suit the role of left midfield. Wonderful. Noxus. Now honestly, this guy's so boring. However, he has some abilities that would be broken in football. Take his W ability Wither, for example. That lets him slow an opponent down so much, a slug would look like Usain Bolt in comparison. This is great for defending against strikers and wingers. His Q Siphoning Strike is a point-and-click ability, which means he needs no skill to secure accuracy. This is transferable on the pitch, as he can use it to accurately tackle Neymar, and Neymar can't therefore dive. He'll still try though, ain't that right, chat? Lastly, his ultimate ability, Fury of the Sands, turns him into the BFG. It makes him huge, which is also good for defending. In conclusion, I'm sticking this doggo in defense, center back. Misfortune's Q, Double Up, essentially gives her a boost in successful ricochets, meaning in football when she shoots the ball, if it hits the goalkeeper, there's an increased likelihood of it then hitting the post and going in. Combine this with her speed boost from her W strut, slow from her E, make it rain, and flurry of shots from her ultimate bullet time. And I say she's first pick to be our striker. Sorted! Shaco. Now, this guy's a mischievous little shit. He's kinda like the Bruno Fernandes of League of Legends. At least, how he makes you feel is akin to Bruno. Annoyed and can't be arsed for his rat antics. Luckily for us, the world rewards cheaters, and since Shaco can turn invisible and teleport, he'll make a perfect center midfield player, getting up and down the pitch in the blink of an eye. Honestly, my dear boys and girls, our team is looking pretty overpowered so far. Let me know what you think so far, and please subscribe. This video is taking so long to make, I'm losing the will to continue. Morgana. This chick's boring too. She has hella roots to stop people in their tracks, and a shield though. Perfect for defending and stopping the opposition in their tracks before they get too close to our goalkeeper. Put her in center defensive midfield. Ah, Hecarim, this pony will be a pivotal player. Thanks to his E-devastating charge, he will be able to run up and down the pitch constantly. He's also a beefy boy, strong. So he can both tackle and keep the ball on him anywhere he goes on the field. Also, his ultimate ability, Onslaught of Shadows, allows him to charge up and down the field whilst also causing all opponents around him to flee away from him, leaving open space to both attack and defend exceptionally. MVP potential. I'll place him in right midfield. I forgot she even exists, not gonna lie. She can go in goal. Thank you. Next. Prize. Now, this avatar-looking guy will be our playmaker. Why? Because his kit consists of abilities he can spam, like his Q overload. Therefore, he can transfer this to football and start spamming passes, thereby creating plenty of openings and opportunities for his team to penetrate the opposing team's defense and fertilize the goal. He can also teleport, so I think putting him center attacking midfield is a good call. He will be captain too. Now, she is highly capable and can play anywhere. However, her ultimate petrifying gaze can stop everything by turning it to stone. This is a crucial skill for a goalkeeper, so we're gonna put her in goal and take Fiora out. We'll decide where to put Fiora at the end, so stay with me, people. Twitch, a Zonite plague rat by birth, but a connoisseur of filth by passion. He's not afraid to get his paws dirty, and that's exactly what we need in our second striker. His Q ability, Ambush, allows him to camouflage and gain movement speed, perfect for breaching gaps in the enemy team's defense before they realize. He also smells like absolute utter shit. And his venom cask amplifies that stench, meaning everyone will run away from him, allowing him to secure guaranteed 1v1s against the keeper all the time. Now I know you all thought Fizz should be in an attacking position, but guess what? I ran out of space. So, he's going to play center back, and honestly, he suits it well. His Q and E abilities give him 2 gap closers, allowing him to secure successful tackles. And also, he can throw out his ultimate ability to gobble up their players one by one. Once all their players have been eaten by Fizz's shark, the opposing team's manager will be forced to forfeit, consequently securing our team's victory. And there we have it, my dear boys and girls. Cassiopeia, Fiora, Noxus, Fizz, Shaco, Morgana, Hecarim, Zeri, Rise, Misfortune, and Ratboy. We've had quite the journey, haven't we? But it was worth it, 'cause this team's looking, dare I say, sexy. However, there's one more crucial thing we need to do. We need to evaluate our team's chemistry, and we will do this by examining our players against the following criteria. Regional chemistry, raw power level, trust between players. And so without further ado, let's get into it. All right, regional chemistry-wise, this team is absolutely disgusting. There's basically no coherent national identity here whatsoever. Our squad looks like Rise accidentally opened 6 different portals and just accepted whoever walked through first. Hashtag globalization. Hashtag don't let Donald Trump hear about this. He might have a heart attack. Actually, do show him. Starting with the strongest regional link on the team, Bilgewater. Miss Fortune and Fizz actually have decent chemistry here. Miss Fortune basically runs Bilgewater at this point, while Fizz is heavily tied to the region and definitely knows of her existence. They're chaotic in completely different ways, but at least they come from the same corner of Runeterra. That's probably the closest thing this team has to a normal friendship. Then you've got the Shadow Isles stallion Hecarim, who immediately ruins the mood of the entire squad. Nobody from Bilgewater likes the Shadow Isles, considering the Black Mist has been terrorizing that region forever, so Hecarim showing up to training probably feels like a world-ending event. Also, Twitch being on the same team as anyone already lowers chemistry automatically. Zone champions are already looked at as unstable by most regions, but Twitch specifically is literally a plague rat crawling around sewage tunnels. There is absolutely no chance Fiora survives 5 minutes in the same locker room as this guy without demanding a transfer. But honestly, she's lucky she's on the team. I don't even know who the fuck she is. Speaking of Fiora, Demacia has almost zero chemistry with the rest of this squad. Fiora is all about discipline, honor, and elite standards. And now she's sharing a backline with a ghost centaur, a magical fish, and a giant dog god from Shurima. Now let's move on to the Shuriman side of the team with Noxus and Cassiopeia. Now technically, Cassiopeia and Noxus are connected through Shurima law, but not in a good way. Cassiopeia is directly tied to the events that helped awaken ancient Shurima in the first place. And Noxus would absolutely view her as a manipulative, power-hungry problem immediately. So even the shared regional chemistry here still feels toxic, like the relationship between you and your boo Thang. Rise kind of exists outside normal regional chemistry entirely because he's traveled literally everywhere across Runeterra. If anything, Rise probably knows of almost every single champion on this team already, which honestly makes his inclusion even funnier because he absolutely should know this team is a terrible idea. Then there's Morgana. Morgana's technically tied to Demacia nowadays, but she's so disconnected from politics and civilization in general that she almost acts as neutral chemistry. She's one of the only champions here capable of actually tolerating everybody else without immediately starting conflict. Which means Morgana is basically the team therapist. See, goths aren't bad. They're just misunderstood. And then there's Shaco. I don't even know where this fucker's from, so if any of you watching know, please tell me in the comments. Anyway, the overall regional chemistry score? Honestly, maybe a 3 out of 10. There are tiny little links scattered around the team, but most of this squad either comes from completely opposing regions, morally hates each other, or would actively classify the others as threats to civilization. This is less of a football team and more of a Runeterra emergency meeting. An emergency meeting where nothing gets done and is absolutely useless. Wait a minute, is this NATO? Now, when it comes to raw power level, this team is absolutely ridiculous. Chemistry-wise, they're a disaster. They're mentally unstable. Probably one bad loss away from civil war. But in terms of pure power, this squad might accidentally be one of the strongest teams Runeterra has ever seen. Starting with Noxus. Don't get it twisted, people. I still think he's boring as fuck to play in League of Legends. However, outside of the game, this mutt alone boosts the entire category immediately. Noxus isn't just powerful, he's an ascended god warrior from the peak of the Shurima Empire. We're talking about a being capable of fighting armies, surviving for thousands of years, and carrying knowledge that most mortals couldn't even comprehend. Then there's Rise. Rise is terrifying because unlike a lot of champions, his power comes with intelligence and restraint. This is someone carrying enough magical knowledge to potentially destroy entire regions if he wanted to. The only reason Rise doesn't instantly become one of the most dangerous beings in Runeterra is because he actively chooses not to abuse his power, which honestly makes him scarier. Because if Rise ever decides the match is important enough, it's over. And that's why he's the captain. Then Morgana enters the conversation. Morgana's power level gets underrated because she's calm, but lore-wise she's an incredibly powerful celestial-born being with ancient magic and absurd battlefield control. And unlike some champions here, Morgana actually has discipline. So, while everyone else is causing chaos, she's probably the only reason this team remains functional at all. But let's not forget we have Hecarim, pure nightmare fuel. This is a spectral warlord empowered by the Ruination itself. An undead cavalry monster that has slaughtered countless souls across the Shadow Isles. Physically terrifying, mentally terrifying, emotionally terrifying. There is no scenario where opposing attackers enjoy playing against this man. And somehow, the team still isn't done, because Cassiopeia is secretly one of the scariest players here too. People forget Cassiopeia has deadly ancient magic, petrification powers, and enough manipulation skills to mentally destroy half the enemy team before kickoff. Putting her in goal might genuinely be unfair, because strikers are basically entering a boss fight every time they approach the box. And on top of that, this slithery sort can be our flykeeper if she wants. Then offensively, Miss Fortune alone gives this squad elite damage potential. She's not ancient god tier like Noxus or Rise, but she is one of the deadliest and most successful human champions in Bilgewater lore. Hyper-intelligent, ruthless, and incredibly skilled. Meanwhile, Twitch and Shaco add something even worse: unpredictability. Because raw power isn't always about noble strength or magical greatness. Sometimes it's just, how much damage can this lunatic cause before someone stops him? And in that category, Shaco might genuinely be top tier. Then there's Fizz, which is hilarious because Fizz feels like comic relief on this team, until you remember he's actually an ancient magical trickster capable of summoning gigantic sea creatures and casually wiping people out. So even the funny fish character is secretly horrifying. This squad genuinely has celestial magic, ascended power, world rune knowledge, ruination energy, ancient curses, petrification magic, supernatural assassination, and biological warfare. At this point, the formation barely matters because the enemy team is probably psychologically defeated already. Raw power level rating? This is easily a 10 out of 10. Okay, now we move into probably the most important category for any successful team: trust between players. And honestly, this might be the worst trusting squad ever assembled in Runeterra history, because the second you actually look at these personalities together, you realize almost nobody here should realistically trust anybody else. Starting with the biggest issue immediately: Shaco. Nobody trusts Shaco. Not because he's from a rival region, not because of politics, not because of some ancient war. Nobody trusts him because we don't know if he's even fucking real or not. Nobody knows what he wants. Nobody knows where he came from. Nobody even knows if he's capable of normal human interaction. If Shaco tells you, "good pass," after the game, you're checking your house for traps afterwards. And honestly, Twitch isn't much better. Twitch has the energy of someone who would absolutely steal from his own teammates mid-match if he thought it was funny. He's a chemically enhanced plague rat from Zaun, who spends most of his life crawling through sewage and spreading disease. I can smell him through the damn screen. Fuck my life. From Fiora's perspective, she's an elite Demacian duelist forced to work alongside. An undead spectral warlord, a plague rat, a demonic clown, a manipulative snake woman, and a fish carrying a trident. This is probably the worst day of her life. Then you look at Cassiopeia. Cassiopeia might actually be one of the least trustworthy champions in League lore. Almost everything about her character revolves around manipulation, ambition, and self-interest. Even if she's performing well in goal, the rest of the squad is absolutely wondering, what's her angle here? Noxus especially would never fully trust her considering her direct ties to the awakening of ancient Shurima. And then Hecarim enters the conversation. Hecarim doesn't even feel capable of team play emotionally. This is a man consumed by violence, ego, and destruction. The ruination basically amplified every terrible quality he already had. You're not building chemistry with Hecarim. You're just hoping he points in the right direction during the match. Which leaves Morgana and Ryze carrying the entire emotional stability of the squad. And honestly, these two are probably the only players capable of genuinely cooperating with multiple people on the team. Ryze understands responsibility better than almost anyone in Runeterra, while Morgana actually believes in compassion and redemption. Without these two, this team probably collapses into paranoia and infighting immediately. Miss Fortune is interesting too because she's trustworthy. To a point. She's a strong leader and incredibly intelligent, but she's also a Bilgewater pirate ruler. Loyalty in Bilgewater usually lasts only as long as it benefits everybody involved, so she probably trusts the team tactically, but emotionally? Absolutely not. Then there's Fizz. Fizz weirdly might be one of the less problematic personalities here, because although he's chaotic, he's not outright malicious like half the squad. Honestly, the fact that Fizz somehow ends up being one of the more trustworthy players tells you everything you need to know about this team. Overall trust between players? Let's just say this team is surviving purely on talent. There are tiny little pockets of respect. Ryze and Morgana, Noxus respecting wisdom and strength, Miss Fortune trusting competence, maybe Bilgewater familiarity with Fizz. But outside of that, everybody is either hiding something, plotting something, cursed, unstable, undead, infected, or psychologically terrifying. The trust between players rating? Honestly, 2 out of 10, and that might still be generous. This team doesn't feel like 11 teammates, it feels like 11 separate boss fights temporarily agreeing to wear the same kit. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen, our first League of Legends World Cup draft. Comment what this team's overall rating and chemistry score should be, and let me know what you want to see in the next video. Please do show my YouTube Chanel, yes, Chanel, cause I'm fancy, some love. Thank you, until next time, Gra. The team I drafted today might be one of the weirdest squads Runeterra has ever produced. Let's begin!
First up, Rumble. Senna. Veigar. Tristana. Ornn. Rel. Sion. Talia. Draven. Gangplank. Nautilus.
Golly gumdrops, chat. This is an interesting one. Time for the deep dive. Now let's talk about raw power level. And honestly, this team is one of the weirdest power curves we've had so far. Because unlike the last squad, which had multiple world-ending threats stacked on top of each other, this team's strength comes from having power in completely different forms. Some players here are physical monsters, some are magical prodigies, some are ancient beings, and some are simply too stubborn to die. Let's start with the biggest name immediately, Ornn. Because whenever Ornn is on your team, the power level discussion changes instantly. This isn't just a strong champion, this is a literal demigod. A being so powerful that entire civilizations worship him. The creator of legendary weapons. One of the oldest entities walking around Runeterra. If this was a normal football tournament, Ornn would feel unfair. The man literally forged mountains, and somehow he's sharing a squad with a bunch of yordles. Then we've got Sion, and Sion is one of those champions whose power level becomes more ridiculous the more you think about it. This man was already one of Noxus's greatest warriors while he was alive. Then he died. Then Noxus brought him back. Now he's essentially an unstoppable, undead siege weapon. Most defenders are difficult to get past. Sion is the wall. If he decides he's winning an aerial duel, you're probably not changing his mind. Then there's Nautilus, another absolute monster. People often forget how terrifying Nautilus actually is because he's always shown as a support champion in-game. Lore-wise, he's a gigantic supernatural force of the ocean, a walking deep-sea nightmare wrapped in metal. This man looks less like a footballer and more like a raid boss. Then we move on to Senna. And Senna is secretly one of the strongest players on the team. She has spent years fighting the Black Mist, surviving things that should have killed her, and wielding relic weapons powerful enough to battle some of the most dangerous supernatural threats in Runeterra. The fact that she's standing next to Ornn and Sion makes people underestimate her, but Senna is absolutely elite. Then we have Rel. And honestly, Rel might be one of the most dangerous human champions in League lore. She can manipulate metal on a ridiculous scale. Weapons, armor, structures. If this was real football, half the stadium might not survive her warm-up routine. And unlike some powerful champions, Rel is still incredibly young, which somehow makes her even scarier. Then there's Talia, another champion whose power level gets overlooked. This is someone capable of reshaping the Earth itself. Entire battlefields can change depending on where Talia decides to fight. She's not flashy like Ornn or Sion, but make no mistake, she's incredibly powerful. Then we get to the Yordle section of the squad. And this is where things become deceptively dangerous, because Tristana, Rumble, and Veigar all look harmless compared to the giants around them. They are not. Tristana carries enough firepower to turn a defensive line into a historical event. Rumble built a giant mech because apparently being a Yordle wasn't enough. And Veigar is genuinely terrifying. The funny thing about Veigar is that everyone treats him like comic relief. Lore-wise, he's actually one of the most powerful magic users on the entire team. The man's magical potential is absurd. He's just too busy trying to convince everyone he's evil. And finally, we have Draven and Gangplank. Now compared to demigods, undead juggernauts, and world-class mages, these two might seem weaker. But that's only because they're being compared to monsters. Draven is still one of Noxus's most dangerous combatants. And Gangplank became one of Bilgewater's most feared men through sheer ruthlessness, intelligence, and survival instinct. Neither of them got where they are by being weak. Overall, this team has everything. Demigods, undead war machines, ancient magic, elemental power, darkness-fighting relic weapons, living tanks, and a Yordle who may accidentally vaporize someone trying to prove he's evil. Raw power level rating? This is another high score. I'm giving this squad a 7.5 out of 10. The absolute peak isn't quite as ridiculous as some teams that feature multiple celestial beings or reality-ending entities. But from top to bottom, this might be one of the deepest squads we've seen so far. There are very few weak links here. And if this team ever decided to use their powers properly instead of playing football, the World Cup would become the least important thing happening that day. Compared to last episode's complete disaster class, this team actually has some surprisingly strong regional chemistry. Not perfect chemistry by any means, but for the first time in this series, it genuinely feels like certain groups of players would naturally gravitate towards each other. Let's start with the biggest chemistry hub on the team, Noxus. We've got Draven, Rel, and Scion repping the Mandem from those ends. Now that's a fascinating trio because they all represent completely different sides of Noxian culture. Draven is the celebrity, Scion is the weapon, and Rel is the rebellion. Draven would absolutely love being the center of attention at the World Cup. Scion probably doesn't even know what the World Cup is, and Rel actively hates a lot of the Noxian system that created her. So while they share a region, this isn't exactly friendship chemistry. It's more like awkward co-worker chemistry, like that one time Nicki Minaj and Cardi B were on the same track at the same time they were beefing. Good times, good stuff. Anyway, moving on, we've got another strong regional connection with Talia and Ornn. Not because they're from the same region, but because both are deeply tied to some of the oldest parts of Runeterra. Talia is one of Shurima's most important young mages, while Ornn is literally an ancient Freljordian demigod. They don't have direct lore connections, but both understand the responsibilities that come with protecting people rather than ruling them. Ironically, they might get along better than half the actual teammates from the same regions. Then we arrive at the Yordle corner of the locker room. Rumble, Tristana, and Veigar. Damn! Immediately, the chemistry gets weird because Tristana is basically one of Bandle City's greatest heroes. Rumble is an eccentric inventor who spends most of his time building dangerous machines. And Veigar is a self-proclaimed evil overlord who desperately wants everyone to fear him. The funniest part is that Veigar probably thinks he's the most terrifying player on the squad while standing next to Scion, Nautilus, and Ornn. The Yordle chemistry is definitely there. It's just incredibly dysfunctional, just like my family. Then we move over to Bilgewater, and this is where things get spicy with Gangplank and Nautilus. Now, technically, both are tied to Bilgewater's history, but if there's one thing Gangplank does not want to see walking into training, it's Nautilus. Nautilus basically exists as a terrifying reminder of greed, betrayal, and unpaid debts, which coincidentally describes most of Gangplank's career. So while they have regional chemistry on paper, the reality is probably far more uncomfortable. Then we get to Senna. Senna's interesting because she's one of those champions whose experiences stretch far beyond a single region. Demacia, the Shadow Isles, the Black Mist, you name it. She's traveled through enough of Runeterra's major conflicts that she can probably find common ground with more players than most people on this team. In fact, she might quietly be one of the best chemistry pieces in the entire squad. And finally, there's Ornn. Ornn doesn't really care where anyone comes from. You could put a Freljordian, a Noxian, a Yordle, and a sea monster in the same room, and Ornn would react exactly the same way, by wanting to be left alone, which somehow makes him one of the least controversial personalities on the team. Overall, this squad actually has more regional overlap than I expected. You've got Noxian representation, Bilgewater representation, multiple Yordles from Bandle City, and ancient figures connected to some of Runeterra's oldest cultures. The problem is that sharing a region doesn't automatically mean liking each other. In some cases, it actually makes things worse. Overall regional chemistry rating? I'd give this team a solid 6 to 7 out of 10. There are genuine connections here. There are shared backgrounds. There are players who understand each other's worlds. But there are also enough grudges, conflicting personalities, and walking disasters to stop this team from becoming a truly unified squad. For once, this isn't a team of complete strangers. It's a team of people who know exactly why they don't trust each other. Finally, it's time for arguably the most important chemistry category of all, trust between players. And honestly, this team is fascinating because it's not nearly as bad as the squad from last episode. There are still some major issues here, but for the first time, I can actually imagine parts of this team functioning like a real football club. Let's start with the biggest positive straight away, Senna. If there is one player on this entire squad that almost everyone could trust, it's Senna. She's spent her life protecting people, fighting impossible odds, and putting herself in danger for others. Whether you're a Noxian soldier, a wandering mage, or a Yordle inventor, Senna is probably one of the few players here who genuinely has everyone's respect. She's basically the emotional glue holding this team together. Then we have Talia, and Talia has a very similar effect. One of the defining traits of her character is that she's incredibly kind-hearted by Runeterra standards. She's traveled across the world helping people, avoiding conflict whenever possible, and generally trying to do the right thing. Which means if you're building trust on this squad, Talia is one of your safest bets. In fact, if Senna and Talia are in the same dressing room, morale probably increases automatically. Next up is Ornn. Now this guy isn't exactly friendly. He doesn't enjoy socializing. He doesn't enjoy leadership. He doesn't enjoy people in general. Bro's a vibe, to be honest. But you know what Ornn does have? Integrity. If Ornn says he'll do something, he'll do it. You might not enjoy the conversation. You might get insulted during the conversation, but you'll trust him afterwards. And honestly, that's worth a lot on this team. At the Noxian section, we have Draven, Rel, and Sion. And this is where things get complicated. Draven trusts Draven. That's about it. This man loves attention, loves fame, and loves being the center of every room he enters. Now, to be fair, he'd absolutely back his teammates if winning also made him look good. But if things start going badly, Draven is probably the first person looking for someone else to blame. Then there's Rel. Rel's trust issues are completely understandable. She was literally betrayed and exploited by the people who were supposed to protect her. Because of that, she doesn't naturally trust authority figures, organizations, or powerful individuals, which means she'd probably spend half the tournament questioning everyone's motives. Not because she's a bad teammate, because experience has taught her to be cautious. And honestly, she's probably right. Because next, we have Sion. The funny thing about Sion is that trust almost doesn't apply. He's not plotting. He's not manipulating. He's not secretly working against anyone. He's basically a living battering ram. The problem isn't whether Sion will betray the team. The problem is whether Sion remembers the game plan at all. Then we move to the biggest concerns on the squad, starting with Gangplank. Now, Gangplank is many things. A survivor, a strategist, a leader, trustworthy? Not exactly. This is a man who spent years ruling Bilgewater through fear and power. You don't become Gangplank by putting other people's interests ahead of your own. If Gangplank sees an opportunity that benefits Gangplank, there's a decent chance he's taking it. Then there's Veigar. And Veigar's actually hilarious in this category, because Veigar desperately wants everyone to think he's evil. I can't believe how many times I have to say it. The reality is that half the time he's accidentally helping people. So while everyone might initially distrust him, he's weirdly less dangerous than his reputation suggests. The opposite is true for Rumble. Because Rumble isn't malicious at all. He's just incredibly likely to accidentally cause a disaster. You trust his intentions. You do not trust his inventions. Those are two very different things. I do not fall short in these aspects, however, which is why Tristana picked me over that chump. Anyway, finally we have Nautilus. Nautilus isn't really someone you trust. He's someone you avoid owing money to. The good news is that he's not actively scheming against teammates. The bad news is that if he thinks you've wronged him, you're probably ending up at the bottom of the ocean. Overall, this squad actually has a surprisingly decent foundation. Senna, Talia, Ornn. Those three alone provide more trust than most teams could ask for. The problem is that they're sharing a locker room with Gangplank, Draven, Rel's trust issues, Veigar's fake villain arc, and whatever dangerous project Rumble is currently building. Trust between players rating? I'm giving this team a 6.5 out of 10. There are definitely cracks. There are definitely personalities that clash. But unlike some squads we've seen, this team actually has enough genuinely good people to keep everything from falling apart. And in Runeterra, that's honestly pretty impressive. And that's it, folks. The random formation we got is 4-1-4-1. So this is where I placed everyone. Veigar goes in goal because of his busted stun cage thing. Rel left back because she can ride her horsey up and down the pitch. Ornn, Rumble, and Nautilus make up the rest of the defense because they're big beefy boys. Rumble's a fake big boy, but we'll take it. Senna goes CDM because that's where she can support everyone on the pitch. Tristana and Talia go left and right mid because they have great mobility. Sion center mid because he's a certified unit. Gangplank beside him because, to be honest, he's lucky to be playing. I can't stand him. And Draven in strike, of course. He's more of a glory hunter than Manchester City fans. Let me know what you think and which formations and positions you would choose instead of mine. Until next time, gra! Today, I'm drafting 11 completely random league champions into a football team, building them into a real formation, and then finding out whether this squad could actually win the World Cup. But football ability isn't the only thing that matters. We'll be analyzing team chemistry, leadership, trust between players, lore connections, and raw power level to see whether this team becomes champions or completely falls apart before kickoff. And after seeing some of the champions we've drafted today, I genuinely have no idea which way this is going to go.
Player 1 is Jace, the Defender of Tomorrow.
Stop the cap.
Vex, the Gloomist. Ambessa, the Matriarch of War. Quinn, the girl with her oversized parrot. Poppy, Keeper of the Hammer. Camille, the Steel Shadow. Tryndamere, the Barbarian King. Jarvan IV, the Exemplar of Demacia. Nidalee, the Bestial Huntress. Lysandra, the Ice Witch. And Galio, the Colossus.
This appears to be a spicy squad chat. Regional chemistry-wise, this might actually be one of the most interesting squads we've drafted so far. Because unlike previous teams where everyone came from completely different corners of Runeterra, this team has multiple champions who are deeply connected to some of the biggest regions in League lore. Let's start with the strongest chemistry group immediately, Demacia. We've got J4, Quinn, Poppy, and Galio. That's an incredible foundation for any team, if I may say so myself. Jarvan is literally the crown prince of Demacia. Quinn is one of Demacia's most loyal and respected scouts. Galio has protected Demacia for generations. And Poppy, despite not always receiving the recognition she deserves, has spent centuries fighting for the ideals Demacia was built upon. These four instantly understand each other. They share values, they share culture, they share purpose. This is easily the strongest regional chemistry core we've seen in the series so far. If this team has a dressing room leadership group, it's probably sitting right here. Then we move over to the Noxian side of the squad with Ambessa. Now Ambessa immediately creates an interesting dynamic because Demacia and Noxus don't exactly have a history of getting along. In fact, if Jarvan sees a powerful Noxian warlord walking into training, he's probably already preparing for political negotiations before the warm-up even begins. That being said, Ambessa isn't some reckless conqueror. She's intelligent, strategic, and understands power better than almost anyone. So, while there's definitely tension here, I don't think it becomes outright hostility. It's more like two rival nations being forced to share the same dressing room. But if I ever see Ambessa, I'm getting revenge for my baby cakes, Caitlyn. Then, we've got Camille and Jace representing Piltover, and this is another fascinating pairing. Both come from Piltover. Both are influential figures. Both care deeply about protecting their city. But they approach problems very differently. Jace wants to inspire progress. Camille wants to control it. So while there's definitely regional chemistry, there's also a chance these two spend half the tournament arguing over how the team should actually operate. Still, compared to some squads we've seen, this is a very healthy connection. Then we move north to the Freljord with Tryndamere and Lysandra. And this is where chemistry becomes complicated, because technically they are connected through the same region. However, the problem is that Lysandra is one of the most secretive and manipulative figures in all of Runeterra. Tryndamere, meanwhile, is a proud warrior king who values strength and loyalty above almost everything else. So while they share a homeland, I don't think there's much trust here. This is one of those cases where regional chemistry exists on paper, but feels much weaker in reality. Then there's Nidalee. Nidalee doesn't really belong to any major political faction. She's tied to the jungles of Shurima and spends most of her life away from civilization altogether. Which means she's kind of a chemistry wildcard. She's not carrying regional rivalries, she's not bringing political baggage, she just exists slightly outside everyone else's conflicts, and honestly, that might be useful on a team like this. But we mustn't forget Vex, who might genuinely be the funniest player to analyze in this category, because Vex comes from Bandle City, a place full of magical adventures, optimism, and wonder. And she hates all of it. She's lucky she hasn't ran into me yet, that's for sure. Anyway, as I was saying, so while most champions gain chemistry from their origins, Vex somehow manages to have anti-chemistry with her own region, which honestly feels very on-brand. The funny thing about this squad is that there aren't many completely isolated players. Most teams we've drafted have felt like 11 random strangers. This one actually feels like several established groups stitched together. You've got the Demacian core, the Piltover duo, the Freljord pair, Ambessa representing Noxus, Nidalee doing her own thing, and Vex actively refusing to enjoy any of it. Overall regional chemistry rating? I'm giving this team an 8 out of 10. The Demacian core alone carries this category. There are genuine regional connections all across the pitch, multiple players who understand each other's cultures, and very few completely disconnected individuals. There are still some political tensions, there are still some rival ideologies, but compared to most World Cup draft squads we've seen so far, this team actually feels like a team, which is honestly a terrifying thought considering how powerful some of these champions are. Now let's talk about raw power level. And let's be real, this team is ridiculous. Because while some squads rely on chemistry, leadership, or teamwork to succeed, this one has another option entirely. They can simply overpower almost everyone they come across. Let's start with the biggest name immediately, Galio. Because whenever Galio walks onto the pitch, the power level discussion changes instantly. This isn't just a giant statue. This is a colossal magical guardian capable of fighting some of the most dangerous threats Runeterra has ever seen. The man is basically a skyscraper that punches evil for a living. And somehow he's sharing a team with even more monsters. Because next we have Lysandra. And Lysandra is terrifying in a completely different way. She's one of the oldest and most powerful mages in all of Runeterra. A woman who has spent centuries manipulating events from the shadows while helping contain one of the greatest threats the world has ever known. The scary thing about Lysandra isn't just her power. It's how intelligent she is while wielding it. Then we've got Tryndamere. And Tryndamere is one of those champions whose lore sounds unfair when you actually think about it. This man has survived through sheer rage. He has fought through injuries that would kill most people. And the angrier he gets, the more dangerous he becomes. If this World Cup ever goes to penalties, Tryndamere is absolutely the last person you want standing on the halfway line. Then we move over to Demacia. Jarvan IV may not be a god or an ancient sorcerer, but make no mistake, he's still one of the most formidable warriors on the team. The future king of Demacia didn't get where he is through politics alone. He's a battle-tested leader who has spent his life fighting on the front lines. Then there's Quinn, and Quinn's strength comes from precision rather than overwhelming power. She's not trying to flatten mountains. She's trying to eliminate threats before they even know she's there. Add Valor into the equation, and suddenly you've got one of the most effective scouts and hunters in Runeterra. But wait, Ambessa. She might be one of the most physically intimidating humans on the entire squad. This is a woman who has built her reputation through strength, warfare, and leadership. You don't become one of Noxus's most feared warlords by accident. If Ambessa tells the team to press higher up the pitch, everyone is pressing higher up the pitch. Then we arrive in Piltover with Jace and Camille. And this pairing is fascinating because both are incredibly dangerous for completely different reasons. Jace possesses some of the most advanced Hextech weaponry in Runeterra because he betrayed me. Meanwhile, Camille has spent years enhancing herself into the perfect operative. Jace represents technological power. Camille represents precision-engineered efficiency. Neither is someone you'd enjoy playing against. Then there's Nidalee. And Nidalee is another champion people underestimate. This is someone who can transform into a deadly predator at will and has spent most of her life surviving in one of the most dangerous environments in Runeterra. She doesn't need armies. She doesn't need technology. She's dangerous all by herself. In fact, she's the type of bad bee that I like. Hit me up, shorty. Grah! Then we have Poppy. Now, Poppy might be the most deceptively powerful champion on the team, because she's humble, kind, and doesn't seek glory. But she's also carrying one of the most legendary weapons in Demacian history. The funny thing is that Poppy is probably one of the strongest players here and would never admit it. And finally, Vex. Now, Vex doesn't look threatening. She doesn't sound threatening. She barely looks interested in being here. But make no mistake, Vex possesses incredibly powerful shadow magic and has abilities that make her far more dangerous than people initially realize. She's basically the footballing equivalent of someone sleepwalking into a fight and accidentally winning it. Kind of like Lee Sin, actually. Huh, go figure. Overall, this team has everything. Ancient magic, military power, Demacian legends, Hextech technology, shadow magic, shapeshifters, and a giant stone colossus that could probably defend an entire half of the pitch by himself. Raw power level rating, I'm giving this team a 9 out of 10. There are very few weak links here. Almost every player brings some form of elite power to the squad, whether that's magical strength, physical dominance, military experience, or sheer survivability. And if this team ever stopped focusing on football and started using their full abilities, winning the World Cup would probably become the least impressive thing they accomplished that week. Awesome! Now we move on to one of the most important categories in the entire World Cup. Trust between players. Because you can have all the talent in the world. You can have incredible chemistry. You can have unbelievable power. But if your teammates don't trust each other, the whole thing falls apart. And I'm not gonna lie, this team is surprisingly complicated because there are some players here who would trust each other with their lives and others who probably wouldn't trust their teammates to hold a water bottle. Let's start with the biggest positive immediately, the Demacian core, Jarvan, Quinn, Poppy and Galio. This is the foundation of trust on this entire squad. Jarvan and Quinn have both dedicated their lives to protecting Demacia. Galio has spent generations defending its people, and Poppy is arguably one of the purest-hearted champions in all of Runeterra. These four aren't just connected by region, they're connected by shared values, duty, honor, protection. If things start going wrong in a match, these are the players who stay united. Then we have Jarvan himself. And honestly, Jarvan might be one of the easiest players on this team to trust. He's a leader. He's straightforward. You always know where you stand with him. There are no hidden agendas, no secret plans, no manipulation. What you see is what you get, which is surprisingly rare in this squad. Then we move over to Quinn, and Quinn is another incredibly trustworthy teammate. She's disciplined, reliable, and professional. If Quinn says she'll cover your run, she's covering your run. No questions asked. Then there's Poppy. And if anyone on this team deserves universal trust, it's probably her. Poppy has spent centuries helping others without asking for recognition. The funniest thing about Poppy is that she's probably the most heroic person in the dressing room and doesn't even realize it. If Poppy tells you she's got your back, you can probably stop worrying entirely. Then we arrive at the first major problem, Lissandra. Now don't get me wrong, Lissandra is incredibly intelligent, incredibly powerful, incredibly effective, but trustworthy? Absolutely not. This is a champion who has spent centuries manipulating people, hiding secrets, and playing the long game. Even if Lissandra genuinely wanted the team to succeed, half the squad would still spend the tournament wondering what she's really planning. And honestly, that's probably a fair concern. After her, we have Camille. Camille is interesting because she isn't evil, but she absolutely prioritizes results over feelings. Camille will make the correct decision. The problem is that the correct decision might not be the one you personally enjoy. So while teammates would respect her, I'm not convinced they'd completely trust her. Then we get to Ambessa, and Ambessa creates a similar problem. She's a fantastic leader, depending on your philosophical bend, a brilliant strategist too, but she's also a Noxian warlord. Ambessa trusts strength, she trusts competence, she trusts results. The question is whether everyone else trusts her, and I'm not sure the answer is yes. Then we've got Jace. Jace is actually one of the more trustworthy players here. He's ambitious, he's passionate, he genuinely wants to help people. The issue with Jace isn't trust. It's that sometimes he believes he can solve every problem himself, which can occasionally create friction. Now, who wrote this script? Jace kicked me off my own council. He ain't trustworthy. Like, hello? Anyway, we have Nidalee next, and she might actually be one of the easiest players on the team to get along with. She doesn't arrive carrying political baggage. She doesn't arrive with grand ambitions. She simply judges people based on how they behave, which means she can fit into almost any group on the squad. Then we have Tryndamere, and Tryndamere is fascinating because from a loyalty perspective, he's excellent. If Tryndamere is fighting beside you, he's fighting beside you. The problem is that his decision-making occasionally gets overridden by pure rage, and that's not always ideal during a World Cup final. Finally, Vex. And Vex is honestly hilarious in this category, because Vex doesn't seem interested in betraying anyone. She doesn't seem interested in helping anyone either. Most players build trust by actively supporting their teammates. Vex's approach is more, "Who are you?" which somehow makes her difficult to analyze. She's not dangerous, she's just emotionally unavailable. Kind of like your crush. It's okay, boys and girls, we've all been there. Stay strong, my dear lads and lasses. Stay strong. Overall trust between players rating? I'm giving this team a 7 out of 10. The Demacian core does a huge amount of heavy lifting. You've got genuinely trustworthy leaders, loyal teammates, and players who share a strong moral foundation. The problem is that they're sharing a dressing room with Lissandra, Camille, Ambessa, and several champions who aren't exactly known for openness. So, while this team isn't falling apart anytime soon, there are definitely a few players checking over their shoulder when the tactical meeting ends. And there we have it, people. Our League of Legends World Cup draft. I decided to go with the 3-4-3 formation and put Camille in goal because all she needs to do is hook her wires onto each goalpost, then she'll be able to move across the goal easily in order to save incoming shots. Tryndamere goes right centre-back because with his ultimate undying rage, he'll be able to chase down attackers relentlessly until he wins back possession, and then uses that rage to counter-attack. Jarvan goes centre-back because he can use his gap closer to cover any openings in our defensive line, and he can use his ult to trap opposition strikers before it's too late. Galio is left centre-back because he's a big boy, plus his ult allows him to assist his teammates by flying to them no matter how far away they are from him. Vex goes left mid, because in the same way, her ult also lets her move across the pitch freely. Poppy stays firm at centre mid, because with her hammer anything's possible. She can knock all dangers literally out of the park, or stadium rather, securing defensive stability and high possession of the ball for our team. Lissandra goes centre mid too, as her ultimate allows her to literally stop the game and freeze everything in its tracks. This means if things aren't going our way, she can use her ice to change the tide of battle. Quinn goes right mid, and Chachi is definitely our most valuable player. Her ability to utilize Valor to fly up and down the pitch as much as she wants means she can help out everywhere. She's perfect for football. And oh look, the traitor Jace is playing too. Whoop-de-doo. Anyway, then we have Ambessa in strike. Because let's be real, her laser-sharp willpower, focus, determination, and work ethic is guaranteed to secure us some goals. Then finally, we have my bae Nidalee at left wing. This is a no-brainer, because her proficiency with her Q ability tells us she's perfect for crossing the ball into the box and creating opportunities to score. She'll also be our captain. Because like we discussed earlier, she's the only one in the team who has no gang affiliations and also isn't a moody brat. And that's it for today's episode of League of Legends, World Cup style. Let me know if you liked it and tell me what champions you want me to cover next in the comments. Until next time, bye-bye.